Yeah, FastAPI Rails. What?
So they're completely rewriting the Next.js.
So you never end up in that half-broken state where the days of choosing based on, is it
I've got the front end on Vercel, but I'm stuck on where to put the FastAPI backend. Railway or Render, which one's better, you think?
So it's Next.js on Vercel, and everything else on a separate PaaS.
Right, Vercel kind of feels like it's built just for Next.js, so I figured Python has to run somewhere else.
That worry might already be outdated.
Wait, what do you mean?
Vercel just dropped 3 big announcements back-to-back over the last 2 days. Dockerfile support, voice AI support, and running multiple services side by side.
Dockerfile? Docker actually runs on Vercel now?
Yeah, FastAPI Rails. Whatever if it spins up an HTTP server, it can run there now.
So that means I could put both the front end and the back end on Vercel.
And you can deploy them together within the same project. It's basically Vercel walking straight into the territory Railway and Render used to own.
Sounds like how you pick a PaaS is about to change from the ground up.
This time we'll go through those 3 pillars, one by one. Let's lay this out in order. On June 29th, CEO Roch made a pretty suggestive post. A decade in the making. Like they've been preparing for this for 10 years.
10 years, so since Vercel was founded.
Right? And within 24 hours of that teaser, 3 announcements dropped back to back. First was Dockerfile support, second was the voice AI gateway integration, and third was Vercel Services.
So they packed it all into 2 days, feels pretty deliberate.
The one that got the biggest reaction was Dockerfile support. Over 800 likes on X.
That's a whole different level of attention compared to the other 2.
I think there's just been a lot of pent-up demand for running Docker on Vercel. The message across all 3 is the same. Vercel's becoming a general-purpose PaaS, not tied to any one language or framework.
So they're completely rewriting the Next.js-only PaaS image, Sharina thinks.
Let's dig into each one in detail, then. Let's start with the Dockerfile support. It's simple, you just drop a Dockerfile, Vercel in the root of your repo.
What about an external container registry? Or setting up Kubernetes?
None of that's needed. Vercel builds it internally and just deploys it for you.
Does it work even without Docker installed locally?
It does. The build happens entirely on Vercel's side, so your local setup doesn't matter. There's only one rule to follow. Your HTTP server has to listen on the $port environment variable.
That's it! Go, Rails, FastAPI, all of it?
Pretty much anything runs on it. The official blog even listed Spring Boot, Laravel, and ASP.NET as examples.
What about preview deployments? Do containers get treated differently?
Same as the front end. Every PR automatically gets its own preview URL. No special treatment just because it's a container. That's very on brand for Vercel.
What about billing? Sharina's guessing running it 24/7 gets expensive.
It's called active CPU pricing. You only get billed for the time it's actually using CPU. While there's no incoming requests, the billing meter just doesn't run.
If idle time isn't billed, that makes it pretty usable for personal projects too.
There was a lot of buzz on X2. People saying they'd migrate off Render over the weekend. Basically, if you can write a Dockerfile, it runs on Vercel now. Next up, Voice AI. AI SDK 7 added 3 new API around voice.
Voice, like talking instead of typing text.
Right? You talk into the browser mic, and the AI talks back. And with Vercel's AI gateway, you can build the whole thing end to end.
So what do the 3 API each do?
Use real-time handles real-time voice conversation, generate speech turns text into speech, and transcribe converts speech to text. Between the 3, you've got a full voice UI.
Wait, with use real-time, do I not have to write my own WebSocket stuff or mic handling?
It's set up as a React hook, so you just call it, and it handles everything from grabbing the mic to playing back audio.
But calling an API straight from the browser feels like it'd leak the API key.
That's handled server-side. It issues a short-lived token. The client only ever gets that token. The real API key never goes out.
Do you need a separate provider contract just for voice?
No, It runs inside the AI gateway, so observability and spend controls carry over as is. You get to see voice calls right alongside your text AI calls, same dashboard.
So you don't have to stitch together a bunch of separate services just to build a voice agent anymore.
Talking about Docker files, the front end and back end tend to end up in separate repos, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when deploy timing gets out of sync, the API changes and suddenly the front end breaks.
That's the problem. The third announcement solves a Vercel Services. You can put Next.js, FastAPI, and go all together inside one Vercel project.
Wait, so a monorepo setup just runs on Vercel as is?
Right, you add a services key to Vercel, JSON, and point it at each services directory. That's it. The framework gets auto-detected. So it's basically just writing a config file.
What about previews per PR? Do the services each spin up separately?
All the services spin up together in the preview environment. That's what's called atomic deployment. So you never end up in that half-broken state where the front end's new, but the back end's still old.
And rollback brings everything back together too.
Right? Deploys and rollbacks always move as a set.
So communication between services, is that just plain HTTP calls?
There's a mechanism called bindings that injects internal URL into environment variables. It doesn't go over the public internet, so latency drops and it's more secure too.
Once you've got a bunch of services though, keeping track of the dependencies sounds rough.
There's a visualization feature on the dashboard called Services Graph. You can see which service depends on what, right there in a diagram. We've gone through Vercel's new features, but what I'm curious about is how it compares to other PaaS options.
Railway and Render used to have a pretty clear line between them, like Vercel for Next.js, Railway or Render for everything else.
That mechanical split doesn't really hold up after this update.
If Docker runs on Vercel now, what's the reason to pick Railway or Render?
The pricing model is really what's left as a selection criterion. Railway's hobby plan is $5 a month, plus resource usage billed by the second on top of that. Memory, CPU, storage. It all adds up based on what you actually use.
What about Render?
Render uses fixed tiers. Starter is $7 a month, and you'll build per service.
So if you run 3 services, that's $7 times 3, which is $21.
Right. Vercel's active CPU pricing, on the other hand, only bills you while the CPU is actually running. Idle time isn't billed, so for a low-traffic personal project, it could end up cheaper.
And with high traffic, Render's flat pricing is easier to predict.
That's the key point. Railway gives you usage transparency. Render gives you price predictability. Those two things are what's left as Railway, and Render's relative strengths over Vercel.
So it's less about is it Next.js or not, and more about which pricing model do you prefer now.
You're choosing by cost structure, not feature differences. The whole comparison axis has shifted. So I said you should pick this based on cost structure, not feature differences. But when I think about it for my own projects, there's a more concrete set of criteria.
Yeah, the pricing model alone doesn't quite settle it.
Let me break it down into 4 questions. First, are you planning to use voice AI? If you want real-time voice or text-to-speech, Vercel AI Gateway is the shortest path.
With the other PaaS options, you'd need to bolt on something separate for the voice side.
Second, do you want a fixed monthly cost, or would you rather pay by execution time? If your project has a fixed budget, Render's fixed tiers are easier to plan around.
For a low-traffic service, active CPU pricing might actually work out cheaper.
Third, do you already have a Docker file? If you do, Vercel becomes an option. You get both preview deployment and fluid compute.
Being able to bring your existing setup over as is makes things easier.
And the fourth, do you want services fully independent or bundled together? If you're leaning independent and don't need atomic deployment, Railway or Render can be simpler. We've talked about how to pick, but it doesn't really click until you actually try it yourself.
I want to give it a shot, but where should I even start?
The easiest way is to add a Docker file. Vercel to a Go or Python project you already have lying around. As long as you've got an HTTP server listening on $port, you can deploy it as is.
So an existing Docker file could basically work as is.
If you're already running Next.js on Vercel, adding services to Vercel JSON is also an option. You can run a FastAPI backend alongside it and try out a monorepo setup.
Sharina's had that exact problem. This might actually solve it.
If you want to play with voice AI, upgrade to AI SDK 7 and try out Use Real-Time. With GPT Real-Time 2, you can get a UI where you talk to it by voice right from the browser, up and running fast.
What about if you're on the fence about migrating from Railway or Render?
First, it helps to compare your current monthly bill against a simulation of active CPU pricing. Which one actually pays off depends on how often your app gets hit. We've covered the good parts so far, but let me mention a few caveats. The audio-related API, use real-time, generate speech, transcribe. Vercel itself still labels all of these as beta.
So it's a bit early to use them in production.
Yeah, until the SLA and pricing structure are spelled out clearly, I'd be cautious about putting them into production. And about that active CPU pricing I mentioned, I haven't been able to pin down the actual vCPU second rate this time.
So we can't say yet whether it's cheap or expensive.
Right? Run a cost simulation against your own workload before deciding. And Render's pricing, I said around $7 to start, but check the official page for the latest numbers.
Pricing changes a lot, so don't just take it at face value.
The days of choosing based on, is it Next.js or not, are over.
Now you can compare it head-to-head with Railway and Render.
I think the big factor going forward is whether you use the AI integration or not. If you want to manage everything in one place, voice AI included, Vercel's the shortest path now.
So it comes down to your pricing model preference and whether you use AI. Those are the two axes.
And whether you need atomic deployment is another factor to weigh.
So if someone's on the fence, what should they do first?
Personally, I'd drop in a single Docker file, Vercel, and just try it. All you need is to listen on $port. And you even get a preview URL out of it. Get a feel for it that way, then branch out into services or the voice API.
Sharina's going to try putting her FastAPI on Vercel too.
2 days that change the assumptions behind picking a PaaS? I'll keep following where this goes.